Hey there, Wes Schneider here with another Tailgate Technology session brought to you by Frontier Precision. So today we're going to be talking about integrated surveying. So what exactly is integrated surveying? Integrated surveying is when we can combine two of our surveys together, so both robotic and GNSS. Today's example, we're going to be doing VRS with our GNSS side of things. So what would that be used for in an everyday circumstance? Basically allows you to run both simultaneously. So traditionally you'd be setting up your GNSS gear, setting control points, and if you know you're going to be using a total station or robotic, you're going to be then tearing down your GPS, setting up your robotic instrument, usually over those points, or resecting to those points, and then continuing your survey at that point. But you might have the circumstance where you need GNSS again. You don't have a direct line of sight going out from your gun to your rover, so GPS would have been great at that point as well. Well, running integrated gives you that flexibility where on the fly I can toggle between both. It just gives you true functionality in the field and confidence when you're running the equipment. So before I get started with going through the gear, I'd like you to check out what version of integrated surveying looked like back in, I think it was around 2002. Come on, let's check it out. All right, here we go. Here's our integrated surveying from back in the day. I think this was about circa 2002-ish, something like that. Kind of had this idea for integrating two surveys together. So we've got both our robotic 5600 and we've got a 5800 with an ACU controller. So talk about a blast from the past. We kind of referred to this as bleeding edge technology. So the first time I heard that was from my boss, Dennis Chemisat, back when I started around that 94 time frame. Not so much cutting edge, but definitely bleeding edge. So in this setup, we'd actually go ahead and have to end a survey and fire up the other survey if you're going between the robot and GPS. It worked, but it wasn't quite as seamless as nowadays. So why don't we go ahead and check out how to do things correctly. Let's go. All right, so talk about a blast from the past for sure. All right, so for today what we're going to be talking about is going to be what it all takes to set up your integrated survey style so that you can run that, some of the settings involved there, and then we're going to set up the gear and show you what a traditional workflow would be to get things up and running, and a few of the tools used then for while you're actually doing the survey. All right, so on that note, let's go ahead and get our controller all set up. Okay, so we're going to be using TSC7 today, running Access. We're also going to be using a Trimble Robotic S7 and Trimble R12 GNSS receiver. Fire up the TSC7 here. All right, you can see Access brings us right into our main map screen. Just so you can see, I already have a project folder set up with my job that I titled Integrated. You can kind of see what that looks like here. There, I'm going to be running in a county coordinate system since we're up here in Minnesota. All right, just backing up. So to set up our survey style, we're going to go into our main menu drop-down. We're going to go into our settings, survey styles. So now you can see the two I already have in there for VRS and for my robotic, so my S7. What we're going to do is click New down there on the bottom. We're going to type in our name. I usually just combine the two names I already had. Your style type is going to be our integrated. Accept that. Okay, so it's going to go ahead and fill in those two values. Since I only had two in there for conventional and for the GNSS, it automatically populated those. But if you had more than one, you can hit that drop down arrow and you can select the correct one. So for example, on GNSS, you might have an integrated for both VRS and for traditional RTK. Below that, your prism to antenna offset. So this is going to be really important. Let me show you why. Okay, so today we're going to be using the multi-track MT1000. So our measurements traditionally then are going to be to our center of glass, but we need to have that offset put in so that when I toggle from my robot to my GNSS, I know that value, that distance from the center of glass to that bottom of our quick release here. So I need to know that. So it automatically adds in that value. Say if I'm running a 6.5 foot robotic rod height, when I switch to GNSS, it needs to put this value in there so that all my GNSS shots have the correct elevation to them. Okay, so I need to know what that is. You can pull your tape out obviously, but all those settings are pre-done for us right in the manual. So this is a good opportunity too to just kind of show you how to utilize that full access manual that's loaded on all these controllers. Just hit that right arrow, go down to help. So what it's going to do is fire up the full access manual on board of the controller. At any time you can do that. Virtually any of the screens you're in, if you're in COGO, road staking, and you have that right arrow you can click on, click help, it'll bring you into that section of the manual that displays and talks about where you're at. So I'm going to scroll down here. We're going to go into our prism antenna offset. So you can see right there on top is our multi-track, 0.034M. You can see the other values. Say you had the R10 360 prism, that one's a 0.028M. So we want to remember though 0.034M. I'm going to close out of there. Go ahead and key in that value. There you go. So there's my offset, 0.112. The next thing right below that is road stakeout. I'm going to go ahead and toggle that on. So if I am doing integrated and I'm doing road staking, this will automatically tell the controller that I want to be using my total station for all my vertical values when I'm doing that staking. That's going to give us our tightest, most accurate information. So accept that and store. There's our new survey style. All right, so we've got that all set up. I'm going to go ahead now and get all of our gear set up and go from there. All right, we've got everything all set up and put together, so let's get our survey started. Going to hit our menu drop down there. We're going to go into measure. We're going to choose our integrated survey style that we already set up. And we're going to be doing a resection. All right. It's going to initially fire up our GPS first. I'm currently in a VRS network, so it's dialing in and gathering that information. There we go. So then it immediately goes into our instrument setup. We've got our values here, so I want to go ahead and tweak those. I sure can. But it is actually looking pretty tight there. Excellent. Let's run with that. Accept that. Temperature, pressure, that's pretty darn close. All right, so now it's asking us for our instrument point name. I'm going to call that point number 1. Give it a control point code. All right, your instrument height. You can go ahead and we've got 2 selections we can use for putting that in. We've got our bottom notch and our true height. I prefer the bottom of notch selection. Pretty straight shot up from a point if you're set up over one and you're not bending the tape in to get your true height. You just switch that over by hitting the right arrow and you can toggle between the 2 there. Okay, and if I did care about this point for future use, I could put in a hub or a nail below it, do that measure up, and then when I'm all done with my resection, I'll have a hard control point that I can use later. Accept. All right, so now it's asking me for my first resected point. For today's demonstration purposes, we're going to be doing a 2-point resection. We do recommend more than that though. Okay, so let's go ahead and move away from the instrument a little bit. We want to make sure we're locked on and everything's going good for tracking before we get too far away. All right, you can see the instrument's currently pointing off in the opposite direction. I do have my video open on the screen. If you don't, you can hit your instrument drop down there on top and you can hit the video. That way you can see where it's at and you can start to scroll it over. Currently staring at the clouds. There we go. Just have to get it close. The tracking will take over from there. On that note, we do want to make sure that our prism is all set up too before we get too far away. So I'm going to go ahead and tap my prism icon on top. You can see I have a few targets pre-set up. I highly recommend setting up your multiple targets ahead of time. Mainly, you could have your multi-track, but maybe set up multiples for your instrument heights. I've got this one at 6.5, maybe have one at 7, 8. Any increment that you use the most, have those pre-done. It gets rid of that human error aspect of things, okay? So let's go ahead. I'm just going to show you what that looks like for the target. I'm using 6.5. My multi-track is selected. You can also see in there too from when I set up that survey style, it actually has the antenna offset in there. So it knows to switch that over when I go to my GNSS selection. Target ID is number 1. The multi-tracks can go up to 8 different channels, so I can have up to 8 multi-tracks on the same job site and not have to worry about any other instrument or mine locking onto multiple sources. Over for tracking mode, you have passive, active, and semi-active. Again, what that means is passive, I can lock onto the strongest reflective source to take a measurement, but this can also be something else reflected, like a mirror, license plate on the job site. So it's something that I don't use too often in an urban environment. Active, which means I'm tracking the multi-track all the time and taking my measurements with that. Again, active tracking gives us that strength in those urban environments, as well as strength when I go through brush. It can follow you very strong through that. But passive is going to be our more accurate measuring mode, which is why Trimble created semi-active. It combines the two. So it's going actively as far as when I'm walking around and it's tracking me. But as soon as I hit my measure routine, it'll go into a passive mode, lock to the center of the glass, take the shot, and instantly switch back to active tracking to continue to follow us. All right, let's accept that. And accept our target. Now let's head on down and get that first resected point in. Okay, we're set up over our next point. If I wanted to utilize this same routine as with the instrument, I could put a nail in here or a pin, because after I take the measurement with the GPS, I'll have a control point here for later use as well. I'm just going to go ahead and call this one point number 2. Also a control point. So you level up, hit enter. When you hit measure, it says, hey, this point isn't in here. Do you want to measure with your GNSS? You bet I do. Hit yes. Automatically switches over to our GPS. I want to maintain my same numbering sequence though. Okay, level up, and this is going to be a control point. So I'm going to go ahead and use a different measuring routine, maybe topo point or something else along those lines. Level up, you can see my E bubbles there. I want to tweak that a little bit, I sure can. And hit measure. See your precision's on top. Everything looks good. I'm going to store that. It will immediately kick back to the gun and begin taking that measurement with the instrument. That's where bipods are super handy when you're doing these resections, especially if it's windy out. Or if you had a little too much coffee. Okay, we got our first resected point in. Now we're going to head over to our second point. These are all beyond face 1 as well. Okay, we're now at our second resected point. I'm going to call this one point 3. Also control point. Level up, hit measure, same message. Accept that, switches over to our GNSS receiver. I can begin my measurement here. All right, 100th by 2. Let's go ahead and store that.
Observation stored. Observation stored.
All right, so there's your residuals for those 2 resected points. On the bottom of the screen, you can see you got your plus point where you can add that in if needed. I'm going to hit my results screen. You can see it pops up with our new coordinates now for the point that's underneath our total station, point number 1. You can also see your standard errors listed if everything looks good. Store.
Station setup completed. GPS search ready.
All right. So on that note, once you've got your station setup complete, you can continue with your topo. So let's go ahead and get some shots measured. Okay, so as long as I have my line of sight with the instrument, we want to try and use that. That's going to give us our best accuracy, especially on vertical shots like we have here. So I'm going to switch back using my F2, and I'm on my total station now. I can go ahead and switch my code around, so let's do a top back a curb. And let's even start these at a new point name range. I'm going to level up.
Observation
All right,
stored.
so that point was on standard. Let's go ahead and switch over so that we can pick up the speed with our topo here a little bit. Let's switch her over to tracking mode. Continue these top back of curb shots.
Observation stored. Observation stored.
All right, so now I've got a shot here that I want to take.
No target.
And you'll notice that I am blocked by that sign. So I can't get this shot with a total station, but I need this shot. So I'm going to hit my F2 and switch over to my GNSS. Again, all my function keys I have preset here are the ones that I use the most, especially in this type of situation. Just to show those, I'm going to hit my menu drop down. On favorites there you see a little pencil icon that allows you to edit your favorites. I can hit function keys on top. So now you can see my F1 is my search. My F2 is switching between my total station and my GNSS. I also have a few other presets like video, map, scanning, all plugged in there as well. Just speeds up that if I can just hit a one button press to do those different actions. Okay, so I've switched over to my GPS. We've got my point sequence in there. If there's ever a point in time where you can't remember which point you left off at, if you hit that little right arrow beside your point, you can hit find. Just key in any number that you know you were at. It will automatically go to that next number that's open in the sequence. All right, I'm going to switch to rapid. And this now is going to be an edge of bit shot. Level up, measure.
Observation stored.
So you can continue with those now.
Observation stored. Target locked.
We lock back on, so I want to continue using my total station shots. Still on edge a bit. Use my F2 to switch over. Take a measurement.
Observation stored. No
All right, that was a perfect example of what can happen in an urban environment. A truck drove by. Well, I might have continued moving and I'm no longer locked on. You can see from the screen the instrument is actually pointed away from it. Okay, so what we want to do now is lock back on. You can use your video feed for it, but I'm going to use my GPS search. I have that preset as my F1.
target locked.
All right, lock back on immediately. It should only be a second or two, depending on how far of an arc that instrument has to turn, but since we have our GNSS head on top, centimeter level accuracy anywhere horizontally and vertically, that gun will turn to you. Zero downtime. Okay, now let's continue our topo. We got it locked back on. Let's go.
Observation stored.
All right, let's top back a curb.
Observation stored.
Okay, I want to continue these top back of curb shots, but obviously they're behind the building, so let's see what happens. All right, I want to continue these shots though, so I'm going to go ahead and hit my F2, switch back to my GNSS. These are going to be my top back of curbs. I'm going to find out where I left off at. Level up, measure.
Observation stored. Target locked.
All right, you can come back outside the same side of the building, come around the other side and hit your GPS search and it'll lock onto you immediately. You can continue to do your shots with your total station. All right, well that was integrated surveying. I suggest you give it a try. You might actually like the time savings and the flexibility you get from it. Okay, until next time, thank you.